Okay, so let's see, make sure, Ian, can you hear me online okay?
Yeah, I can.
Great. All right. So Wildfire is really the cat's meow on the Palo Alto side. This is where you're going to pay the extra money. Gets a little expensive, but it is worth it once you get to configuring it. So the idea behind Wildfire is you have this whole group of Palo Alto users, right? Worldwide licensed users, et cetera. If they have a known bad file, they can upload it to the Wildfire cloud or the global part of it. And then all of these Palo Altos, if they detect something could be bad, they send it up to the cloud as well. So the cloud goes through, it grabs everything, and then it says, okay, is that sample benign, grayware, malware, phishing, et cetera? If it is one of those, then we're going to immediately update the URL database. Remember, we talked about that last week. It will then have that signature written right into the database, and then it will generate a new antivirus malware signature to kick out to all the Palo Altos. So it's kind of its self-reporting system. The more systems you have out there, the more chance you're going to find some kind of spyware, malware, et cetera. It will then report it, or you could submit a file to see if this file is suspicious, right? So obviously, the bigger network of firewalls that are out there, the better this service is overall. When it comes to the Wildfire side, again, when it comes into, let's see here. So you're going to start in the upper left, right? And some firewall is going to receive a file. It's going to see whether or not that file is signed by a trusted signer. If it is, go ahead and allow it. If it's not, let's go ahead and perform a hash on the file. And then it's going to determine whether Wildfire has seen that file based off that hash, right? So it just does a simple SHA, I believe it's Shaw, that goes through there, submits that hash up to Wildfire. If Wildfire has ever seen it, yes or no. If it has, then it's going to determine what the verdict was. Was it benign, grayware, malware, et cetera? Excuse me. And take appropriate action that you see in the lower left. If it has not been seen by Wildfire, then the file size has to be less than the maximum configured. So we're going to set a file size, call it 15 meg. If it's less than that, then we're going to go ahead and send it up to Wildfire. If it's more than that, we just know and we end up allowing the file, right? And the reason for that is what? Most networks do what? When you're at this level. Anybody have any idea? Bueller? So most of them have limited upload, right? Depending on your ISP, et cetera. You usually don't have symmetrical, it's usually asymmetrical going through there, meaning you could have 500 meg down, but 10 meg up or something like that, right? The other part of that is usually out in the cloud and all other services, you pay for the upload portion. So if I'm going to send a file to a client, that costs me money to do that. Download is usually free, but the traffic usually outbound out of my network to somebody usually costs me money. So if I'm in the Amazon cloud, for example, with all my services, if I'm going to be submitting random files out there, I'm actually paying for every single one of those in terms of traffic plus the service that we're going through there. So you can set configuration maximums as to what you want to set that to. The other thing is if it's a 600 gig ISO file, I don't know why you would have a 600 gig ISO file, but you also don't want to submit that kind of data all the way up to the service, right? It would be silly. Let's see, wildfire analysis. So then it comes into the system. It will generate a verdict based off the out in the cloud, and then it will determine what it is over there on the left. It will inform the firewall of the verdict and then send it back and or update the file list, generate a signature, send that signature to all firewalls, and it will be immediately available for those with a Wildfire subscription, or it will come in the form of daily threat updates, right? So that's the benefit of Wildfire is you're getting real-time protection. If I send a 0-day out within a few minutes, it's going to get recognized by a bunch of firewalls. They're going to submit it back to the center. The center determines that's bad. It's going to send it out to all the firewalls if they have the subscription. If you don't, you have to wait till the next day to get your threat update. It comes out. All right. So your Wildfire is really your IDS, IPS type solution in the Palo Alto. It's your intrusion detection and your intrusion prevention more than anything else in this case. All right, so those verdict descriptions, benign just means that it's safe or does not exhibit any malicious behavior. Grayware means that there's no security threat, but it might display obtrusive behavior. Examples would be something like adware, spyware, browser helper objects, etc. Malicious is going to be with the intent and nature that can impose a security threat. Examples of that would include viruses, worms, trojans, remote access tools or rats, rootkits, and botnets. And then lastly, the phishing is just an attempt to trick a user to reveal their login information. And that can be based on properties and behaviors within the website. So we can also protect emails. So any email that comes with attachments or URL links are sent to Wildfire immediately for analysis. If that attachment or link is malicious, Wildfire can then create or download a new signature on the fly, update the Palo Alto database with those known malicious URLs. And then that firewall will then use that information to protect the network going forward. Yeah.
Can you block those URL and attachments and also send them to Wildfire at the same time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes in, right, if it's not a registered signature or whatever else, it passes it up to the PanDB. If PanDB determines it's fine, it'll tell you. If it determines it's bad, it's going to block it.
Okay.
So. All right. Content and Wildfire updates. So Wildfire, if you're just getting content updates, those are going to be available every 24 to 48 hours. You'll get your antivirus signatures, your antivirus is downloaded daily, and your threat prevention license that you have over there. So these are where you get into licensing on the system. If you're doing URLs, you're going to get your URL updates. PanDB will dynamically be downloaded for that, and that is based on you having a URL filtering license. And then lastly, with Wildfire, this is going to be your real time. That's where we're going to find antivirus signatures, your Wildfire signatures and real-time updates, and then the Wildfire license. That's where it's coming from. So you can buy just these packages over here, if it makes sense, and then pay additional for the Wildfire if you want, right? You can buy these all piecemeal going through. Just depends on what kind of level you're at, right? So if you're some business that, threats are a problem, but you don't need real-time threats coming in, you may not buy this part and just buy the URL filtering, right? We're going to filter out stuff that we know is known bad, or even on the threat prevention side, keep the antivirus stuff out. But the Wildfire, that's really for somebody that can't let anything in the network and let it get detected, period. All right. So standard subscription service is going to have analysis available for Windows XP, 7, 10, Mac OS, Linux, Android, and bare metal. On the Windows PE file analysis, it'll look for EXEs, DLL, FONs, SCRs, and others. Antivirus signatures are then delivered via a daily content update that requires that threat prevention license, and then you have an automatic file submission. In the Wildfire subscription service, you're going to have everything that was over there, plus being able to look through Microsoft Office files, PDFs, JARs, CLAS, SWIFTs, etc. You can see the list there, including, if you didn't notice, PowerShell scripts, Visual Basic scripts, etc., even JavaScript. So Wildfire signature updates are then done in real time, and that manual file submission you can do via the API if you choose to do so. The Wildfire private cloud appliance, which is the WF500 and 600, that is if you do not want to submit your files up to the cloud, you can run your own little private cloud device, which will then be a part of the entire network, right? So if you're a big enough company, you may want to do this, or if you want to make sure you never send any kind of files off your network up to the cloud, in this case, it's just Palo Alto for analysis, you can get away from that and run your own cloud device if you choose to do so. Let's see, on the advanced side, again, you get a file that comes in there. It will now do within a hypervisor, be able to do a VM introspection and look down into the guest VM as well. So this is kind of some new stuff that they hadn't had in the past. But it allows you to do dependency emulation, intelligent memory analysis. In other words, it doesn't just stop at the outside layer. It's going to go way deeper in than normal. Let's see, anything's fancy here. So when you do your endpoint, comes over here on the left, you can then go to the next generation firewall, which is the signatures, et cetera, with your inline machine learning. That can be sent off to static analysis, dynamic analysis, and pull all that stuff in there. This is all within the advanced Wildfire. Generally, you're going to see this in more of your cloud-based settings. So if you're using this in the Amazon cloud, which you can buy, right? So you can buy a VM50 or VM500 to run inside the Amazon cloud, protecting all your services in there. Or you can use a couple other vendors' virtual machines that they have available. On that intelligent runtime memory analysis, this is going to allow you to capture the memory in the virtual machine itself and look for malicious activity that's captured during that runtime using fewer resources. So for those of you that get into like the master's program, we talk about in forensics where you guys are capturing the memory in real time because that's where a lot of things are stored. You can then do that continuously and process the stuff that's going through there. In a hybrid cloud example, this would be combining a public and private cloud. You could do, for example, PE and APK files, send those up to the public cloud. However, your sensitive files are sent to the private cloud. In other words, if there's some files you want to keep locally and only on your system, you could send them to your little private Wildfire appliance. The rest of the stuff you can send up to the cloud itself if you want to. All right, so how do we configure it? We go into device setup in Wildfire, and inside general settings, you have this public cloud link that you're going to send it to. If you have set up your own private, you can insert that there as well. Then you're going to have all these file types and defaults. So these are the max file sizes for those given file types. If it's bigger than that, it will not forward it on. And at that point, it will actually allow it through the network unless you tell it no. All right. So for example, a PDF is pretty much capped at just outside 3 meg. So if it's bigger than 3 meg PDF, it's not going to send it, right? So you guys may want to adjust some of those as you go through. Benign and grayware files are going to appear in the Wildfire submission log. That's what's handy about that, is you can go in and see in the Wildfire logs what's actually getting submitted up, right? So, and you can always delete those, remove those, whatever you choose to do. Any decrypted content is not forwarded to Wildfire by default. So if we have encryption turned on, it's not going to automatically send it to Wildfire. You would have to force it to go that way. On the submission settings under Wildfire, this is where you can tell it to record information. So you can tell it to record the source IP, source port, destination IP, destination port, and all the detailed information down below. It means it's going to be available in the Wildfire submission log. So if there's some data that you don't want in there, you could uncheck that as well. Again, extremely customizable, just like everything else we've done. The profile itself needs to implement additional security checks on files allowed in the traffic. So what that means is a file comes in, our security policy is set to allow. Then the Wildfire analysis profile is going to say, okay, what application, what file type, what direction, are we going to send that up to the public cloud or to the private cloud? That profile is just like our other security profiles you guys have been building out so far. There's one called Wildfire Analysis. You have a default, that's the basic one that's in there. You could clone it, you could create a new one from scratch, however you want to do it. And then when you add a profile, for example, this one's going to be our Corp WF, which is our profile for our corporate security rules. In this case, if it's an APK, we're going to send it up to the public cloud. If it's safe for public, send it to the public. If it's under check email, which is like email file links, we're going to send that out to the public. But if it's not safe for the public, AKA Microsoft Office files, we're going to send that to our private box. And you can adjust these rules as you see fit. Under the antivirus, again, you can come into that Wildfire inline ML. We saw that when we talked about it before. This allows you to go and look at those particular ones and set the restrictions, whether you're going to allow it or deny those type of files. You can also set file exceptions down here at the bottom too. So if you have given file names that you know is going to trigger in the system, you could set an override. As long as it matches that file name, it would ignore it. Let's see. To set that up, you just go into your policies under security and add. From there, you're going to select your normal profile type on the left. And then at the bottom, you'll have your Wildfire analysis down here where you can select that profile you just created beforehand. As far as updates, schedule pull period for Wildfire signature updates. It requires a Wildfire license, and without a license, those antivirus signatures are still added to the daily antivirus content, right? So even if you don't have it, you're still going to get the daily updates. You're just not getting real-time updates. You can see over here in that real-time under dynamic updates, you can set that to every minute, and then it's going to download and install automatically, right? And you could also set this up to real-time. So as soon as something gets pushed, it immediately pulls it and installs it. All right. In terms of the report that you send up to Wildfire, you can determine what information you're willing to report. So you can select any of this here. It's going to send that information along with the file or URLs you tried to click on. It'll send those reports back from Wildfire and submit them into your logs within the Palo Alto. And again, you can review those submission logs. To look at those logs or view them in real time, you can come in via SSH into the firewall. Use your debug command, debug Wildfire upload log show. This will tell you what files got uploaded, the size of it, when it was processed, and the result of it. You can also go look in the logs where you have monitor logs, Wildfire submissions, and you can see the details of everything going through, including the verdict that may have submitted out of there. So it wouldn't hurt to go check those logs from time to time if you're using it to go see who's submitting those kind of things up. Is it on accident? Is it on purpose? That kind of stuff, right? If we're always seeing that this address is the one sending everything, you may have a compromised system on your network, right? Let's see here. When you click on one of those logs, you can get a PDF report of what actually got submitted. That's probably handy if you guys are doing any kind of security awareness or something like that. When you want people to see those or higher ups that you need to report to, this little PDF report is handy. You can also download a copy of that file if you need to as well, right? If it's obviously marked as malware, you may want to proceed with caution. You can report an incorrect verdict. So inside the web interface, you can go into these Wildfire submissions. If it comes back and gets you an incorrect verdict link, then you can suggest a different one, like benign. So an example of something or why you would do that is if you guys publish software and then all of a sudden your customers are going, hey, we can't download it, it's hitting our Palo Alto. You as the vendor can then submit that file, the hash, and explain what that software is. And we've actually had that as a result. When we published some software out to a customer, it just hadn't been met in the system yet. And so it was getting blocked as, I think, malware in that case. And that was because it opened up a port, right? It was a normal product, what it needed to do. But because it was getting triggered here, we had to go in and submit a report for that. You can also do it in the Wildfire portal, which is pretty common. You'll go out here when you're managing a lot of the Wildfire stuff. So you could come out here, you grab your Wildfire serial number, we'll view the list of submissions over here. And then that way nobody knows who you are, right? They just know that this was the source and how many times it was submitted. And then in that analysis, you can come in here and look at the files and again, get a copy of that file. So you can do it on your Palo Alto locally, or you can go out to the Wildfire website and actually gain copies of people that have submitted copies of these files. It's a good way for you to also go and check to make sure things are getting caught, which you guys will do in the lab, where you'll go to a known bad file and see if it gets caught coming in the system. That's it. Anybody got any questions over Wildfire? Yeah.
As a large enough private business, why would you not send everything to like the private cloud side of things before you send it up? What's the justification
Cost.
for not sending it there?
Just cost.
Okay.
It's either cost of the submission or it's sensitive data that you don't want to submit up. So say you are, good examples this morning, I bought a tractor, right? So if I had to submit my credit report going through there, you may not want that kind of data floating off into the cloud because it had name, address, date of birth, social security, like all the information you would need for a credit check. It could be in your PDFs, et cetera. So you may not want to send your customer data through there. But you may be happy just fine with it checking JavaScript files you grab from the net kind of thing.
What about the private cloud side of things? Because you mentioned that there's the big overall cloud where you send all your malicious stuff, but you mentioned that there's one that's private. So
yeah, you buy this device. It's
Yeah.
called the WF500 or bigger. That guy there. WF 500 or 600.
Why would you, as a big business, not send everything through that?
You could, it's just cost, right? It boils down to the cost, whether you would set this up, and there again, you can tell it which files go where, right? So some files you may want to send to your local site, the other stuff you may want to submit clear up to the public Wildfire. Because if you notice, when you come down here to the Wildfire side, if I'm in the portal, I can go see your stuff that you uploaded and download it, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's literally that easy and it's public. So if you don't want it to where people could download it, then you're gonna have to end up buying one of those little machines to put on your network. And then the question is like in a really big company, where do you put this, right? So if I put it in Hayes as my data center, but a lot of traffic I have on the East Coast or West Coast, it's now gonna have to traverse the internet to get to that, right? Even if it's an encrypted VPN link or whatever else, the sensitive data you're sending should not traverse that. So you may have more than one of those just because of your data center locations. Also, that would also come back to file size, right? If I'm submitting large files to this and I want to send it to my data center in Raleigh or my one in California, it could get costly just on traffic because I'm sending such large files.
Even if you don't like pay for the Wildfire subscription, everybody still benefits from it just because it's still technically working. You're just getting it on a delayed.
If you don't pay for it, you're not doing active submissions and stuff like that, or at least your firewall's not. You would get it in the event of daily updates and threat updates. Yep. The key is for those that have the ability or need real-time protection coming in. Or if they're more susceptible to zero-day attacks, that's probably the type of business that needs a threat prevention.
So if you didn't have either subscription, none of this would matter at all. So you want to get the URLs even daily, and you want to get
your URLs and your antivirus and that, right? Those are two different subscriptions, which.
Yeah, you had that somewhere. But
I was gonna say, so what are you getting for just the base cost then?
Just the use of the firewall. Yeah. Just your standard firewall features that you would get in there. When you want to take advantage of all this cool stuff that we've been talking about, that's going to be where you would pay for those. So like say I didn't pay for URL filtering, right? We found out we can still do URL filtering. I just have to use external dynamic lists.
Right.
I don't get access to the PanDB for that, right? If I have a bunch of, URL filtering lists that I built up over time, great. It'll filter everything out in that case. Or if I run my own little API, using Python, et cetera, and I scrape a bunch of people's free stuff, you can dump that in there if you choose to do that too. That threat prevention is going to get you basically daily antivirus signatures, things like that, right? It's like Norton 360 for your firewall kind of concept. This Wildfire really just protects you in real time going through there. So if you're a susceptible company that could fall into a zero-day attack and it would cause mass chaos, you probably want to pay for the Wildfire side. If you're a mom and pop bolt and nut shop that doesn't really have super sensitive data and not the biggest of attacks, doesn't mean you're not vulnerable to attacks, right? Just as vulnerable as the big guy. But you probably don't need to pay for that Wildfire. You probably just need to pay for the antivirus side. Or you may go to some third party to cover this part for you. So instead of paying the Palo Alto subscription, you may just peel off that traffic and run it through some other device. Maybe it's a pfSense running Dance Guardian or one of those other third-party services. You could do that as well. Obviously, if it's all in one interface and one dashboard, much easier for the firewall administrator to manage and take care of everything. So a good flow when they log in the mornings, go check all the logs, check the threat logs, see if anything's coming in. That means that something's being matched to one of these threats. Go check the Wildfire submission log, see if you're submitting a lot off your network. Then check like your Global Protect logs, make sure your VPN stuff's working for your clients. And then lastly, start looking a little bit at the traffic logs if maybe you see erroneous information popping up. That's pretty much the standard that we go through and check every single morning. Wake up, check those logs, see what's in there, if there's any major threats. A lot of times what you'll see is just people trying to do like brute force attacks. And then you either turn on the filter, or in my case, I peel through those logs, grab those IPs, add them to the blacklist. Okay. And you could set that up on a cron job, or you could run that manually, whatever you decide.
How much does a wildfire license cost a business, just like average?
It depends on the size of the firewall, but it's not cheap. That's the best I can give you is it's not cheap. I want to say I pay $1,500 for the license here on campus for the lab license, meaning I can't use it for business. I can use it for testing, and it's like $1,500 just to get access to that. So
That doesn't like change your like vendor support, I guess. It's all the same kind of vendor. Like
Yeah.
they just
Yeah,
like notify you.
the idea behind a lab, and you can even have lab licenses as a company, right? So Fort Hayes has one for 2 test devices. If they're implementing to see if this works, that's legal under the lab license. But if you're going to actually run raw traffic all the way through it, you got to go back and change your licensing for that. And I don't know what the latest full-blown licensing is. I can't begin to tell you. And for the ones that I work on actually get to use the lab licenses for full use. They have an agreement with Palo Alto for that side. So, anybody else? Good questions. So,
This one I found, it depends on device, but the one I found on the IT website was for 5 years, $300,000. That's what I found for 5
yeah,
years.
that's probably like the big dog.
That's
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying is like these firewalls, nothing's cheap. Like nothing's cheap. But that in certain industries, it doesn't matter, right? If you are a government entity, it doesn't matter. You have to pay it because of what you're protecting data-wise, traffic-wise going through there.
doing business.
Yeah, exactly. If it's critical infrastructure, you better bet that it matters going through there. And a lot of your critical infrastructure ones will use that, like utility companies, things like that. They're the ones using Palo Altos because they're paying for that name, that level of protection. They can't, the waterworks company can't afford an attack on a 0 day that takes down the water system, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And worse, maybe not take down the water system, but actually crank up the chlorine in the system. And that kind of stuff is what happens all the time when they're attacked. They can either do mad chaos with it or they could just shut down the plant, either way. Obviously, a whole lot worse if they're cranking up chlorine content, killing people off. So, okay, good review questions. Which file type can a firewall send to the Wildfire when the firewall does not have a Wildfire subscription? PDF, JAR, APK, or EXE? Well, I'm sure you guys memorized that really long list that we talked about.
I
PDF?
would assume PDF seems to be the least offensive.
I would say that as well. Which Wildfire verdict? Let's see here. Do I have any comments for anybody? There we go. Okay. Cool. Which Wildfire verdict might indicate obtrusive behavior, but not an actual security threat?
Grayware.
Grayware, right? So benign meant that it's nothing. Malware means it's actually malicious. Phishing is obviously still malicious. Grayware is that it's iffy.
Sus.
Yeah. True or false, when a malicious file or link is detected in an email, Wildfire can update antivirus signatures within the PanDB database.
True? Sweet.
True, right? Because we're actually sending that up to the cloud. The cloud will then update the PanDB database immediately and then filter it on down. Assuming you have a Wildfire subscription, which file state or condition might result in a file not being analyzed by Wildfire? The executable file is signed by a trusted signer, file size limit exceeded, file already has a Wildfire hash, or the file located in the JAR or RAR archive.
Size limit.
Yeah.
Is there like a particular reason why they have like a size cap on them?
It's back to the whole, you're going to be sending mass amounts of data out to Wildfire if you're sending big files. And you're paying for that, right?
And it just straight up denies it, right? If it's too big.
Yeah.
What if you're a government and you just don't have an ISP? You're just, like you act as your own ISP and you just
You may be fine with sending it.
letting it go?
Yeah, you can adjust all your file size limits and go on up from there.
You could have unlimited everything.
Nothing's ever unlimited,
Yeah,
but
true.
you're going to have something somewhere. You also, there again, don't want to choke your entire upload just sending random files up to Palo Alto. So. All right, let's see if we missed any of those.
Does Wildfire not care if it's a duplicate hash at all?
Once it's well, that's just it. It checks the hash first, and if it doesn't recognize, then it sends it.
Okay.
Yep. So we have DBBD. Sounds a little different than what we said. So D was the EXE. All right. B was grayware, B is false, and D, the file is located in a jar or RAR archive. So if we look here, which file state or condition might result in a file not being analyzed by Wildfire? Does everybody get why this is the case? Well, every single one of these was already going to get analyzed by Wildfire, right?
Sure, yeah.
The executable file signed by a trusted signer. We ran the hash, we determined that there was actually something there. If the file limit was exceeded, it's still being analyzed by Wildfire, we just don't send it. They're very tricky in their wording here. Same way, file already has a Wildfire hash, that's because we already sent it up there and it's not going to get triggered there. But the file being located inside of a RAR archive, now it's not going several layers deep like when we actually do our own file stuff locally. A little tricky. All right. Anybody got any question on Wildfire?
So they don't update the. We said, I think for 3 we said true, right? Or did we say false?
On this one? Yeah, you're right. It's false. I'm sorry. Is detected in an email.
So it doesn't update the antivirus signatures?
It's like opposite day here.
It has to be something with the wording of how they said that.
Yeah, they always get.
It sounds right.
There was very something specific on that email. Where's the email side?
There's a catch.
Yeah, right there. It updates it. Oh, it creates and downloads new signatures to the firewall, but it itself doesn't create. No. Wildfire can create and download new antivirus signatures and update the Palo Alto of the malicious URLs.
Seems like the opposite of that question.
So it updates the PanDB of malicious URLs. It doesn't update it for antivirus. Does that make sense? It's scanning whether it's a file or a URL. The keyword there was the URL site. So PanDB is a database of URLs, not signatures. And
I
that,
guarantee I'll remember that.
yeah, that's here, right? So PanDB is actually for URL filtering. Antivirus is a whole separate database. That's the trickiness.
I feel like there were a million other things you could have quizzed us on.
Yeah,
Oh, they always want to get you like these little getches.
I don't
Yeah.
care for the little wording. It's not great. And they do a really good job of it, right? All right. Any other questions on Wildfire? The lab should go pretty smoothly. I tested it the last week and I didn't have any issues. So, but certainly play with it. You guys will actually download a virus and some other bad files, so it's legit. Go ahead and do so. I would recommend not telling your friends to do the same thing or start passing around the file. I've seen some kids do that. Don't. All right. Stop recording.